going to say morning, everyone, but it's not, is it? Good afternoon, everybody. Good start. Okay, so today I'm going to. There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about what CREAM is and the place that I work, and then a little bit about myself and my research, and look at two case studies. There's time to do both of them, otherwise we'll just look at one. One on offshore wind, which is actually quite nice given the talk that we just had, so that'd be quite good. And then a little bit about conservation of pangolin in Namibia. So I thought a little bit to start with, just out of interest, who here is a statistician? Okay, we've got some. Excellent. So why does statistical ecology matter? So ecological data are generally messy and imperfect. Species are hard to detect, habitats vast, inaccessible. We can't survey everything. So we end up looking at portions of things and kind of extrapolating to big pictures. And we can extract signal from the noise, we can handle the uncertainty and that imperfect detection. And importantly, we can provide evidence-based foundations for conservation and management decisions. And that's the thing that drives most of what I do, and it drives a lot of the work that we do at CREAM. And another key aspect of what we do is translation and communication of our research to stakeholders. So there's no point in doing all the things that we do if we can't then explain what we've done or translate that to our stakeholders to be able to make them understand, say, where what we've done might not fit perfectly, for example. And then, as always, we've got the new technologies and future data needs. So we need to be thinking to the future about what things are coming, as well as what we're working on at the moment. So what is CREAM? CREAM is an interdisciplinary research centre at the University of St Andrews, globally recognised for advancing ecological and environmental statistics. We are mainly housed in the School of Mathematics and Statistics, but we are interdisciplinary, and so we also have members from the School of Biology, Geography and Sustainable Development, and also, importantly, Computer Science as well. So we kind of bridge all of these pieces. And we develop cutting-edge statistical methods for biodiversity monitoring and ecological modelling as a whole. We collaborate with conservationists, NGOs and governments worldwide, and we also training the next generation of quantitative ecologists. And we have, in the left here, you'll see this lovely mural. This was painted by one of our research staff and is just inside the doorway to our building. And it's some of the animals and species that we in the building have worked on. And for the eagle-eyed view, you'll notice there is some equations and graphs dotted in and amongst the image as well. If you're interested in that, you can go to the CREAM webpage and click on the different pieces, and it will tell you about the different bits of research that have been going on. And this is some of the mugshots of the people that work at CREAM. So what do we work on? We work on a huge variety of different things. I should also add, we're made up of academics, research staff, and quite a large number of PhD students as well. So we kind of cross the spectrum in that sense. I'm going to just take a little view through each one of these as to the sorts of things that we do inside each one, starting with how CREAM kind of started. So CREAM started over 25 years ago, maybe a bit more than that, and it started with distance sampling methods. Has anyone heard of the distance sampling methods? A couple of you? Excellent. So this is a ways to estimate animal density, abundance and distribution, and also develop survey designs in order to be able to do those things as well. Distance sampling methods involve people walking along transects, for example, and looking for animals. And the idea is that as you walk along, you see everything that's kind of close to you and in front of you, but you can't see things that are further away from you. So it's the declining detectability with distance. So that's the distance part of distance sampling. So it's recording the distance to which you see things so that you can then factor up the scaling to accommodate what you should have seen if you would had perfect detection. Okay, that's like potted distance sampling in a nutshell. There are a huge number of different aspects to that. So you might not see everything on the line because of undergrowth, or things live underground, or you might be in the sea and things are underneath the water. Environmental conditions might depend on what you see. You might be looking at cues, so scats or hearing bird song, as opposed to directly observing the animals. So there's all sorts of adaptations to these methods for looking at densities of distributions of animals on those bases. Spatial capture recapture methods, so that's estimation using the locations of captures and recaptures. So those captures, they might be traps, so you might actually physically trap the animal and record where obviously where it was trapped and if it was trapped. It might be camera traps, so you've taken a photograph, so you've got a trap in that sense. And we have a big project that uses camera traps to monitor global snow leopard abundance across Asia. Passive acoustic monitoring, that's becoming much more and more useful. So we can put detectors in the sea to listen to sounds. In fact, we can use detectors that are already in the sea listening to sounds, like monitoring for earthquakes, and take the whale calls off those and use that information to actually derive distribution and abundance of various species. Or really hard to monitor species like gibbons that are in the trees, we can use acoustic detector to monitor those as well. Impact assessment and risk mitigation. So this is assessment of potential impacts from human actions and activities that may affect individuals or populations of animals. And the general framework that we set up here is this occurrence in the blue. So where are the animals? We need to know where they are and how many there are really to know what might happen to them. The exposure, so we might have models for the exposure. So that might be power driving of a wind farm, so the noise impact from that, or it might be more direct, like the collision risk of wind farm blades on birds. And then from that, what's the response? So the collision one, probably fatal, but not necessarily. The power driving, maybe the whales will move away, but they might come back later, or they might not. That might be the end of it. You've moved them off their feeding grounds, they don't like it. We don't know. Right, this is the things that we're looking at. So it's not just negative impacts, but some of these things might have positive impacts as well. So that's the response and that's the consequence. So what's the consequence? Does it lead to declining populations? Does it lead to changing the distribution of those animals? And what's the consequence of those things? And this, we use this in the assessments for consenting of offshore renewables in terms of prospective, so it's what might happen, but also retrospective assessments. So, for example, we were involved in the compensation assessment for the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the US. So it can come in all sorts of ways. Biodiversity. So this is the abundance and diversity of the natural world used as an indication of ecosystem health. So we look at development of approaches to improve biodiversity monitoring. So that might be survey design, different types of analysis, algorithms for biodiversity indices, coming up with new and improved indices, that sort of thing. And data from new technologies. How do we incorporate things like eDNA? So that's environmental DNA, acoustic data, camera traps, and can we use all of this information to improve these biodiversity indices? Citizen science, big thing now. So this is scientific research carried out with the participation of the public. And we have staff members who've looked at development of techniques to analyze this rich but sometimes very messy data, because you're dealing with misidentification. We don't always know necessarily what they're looking at. Observer preferences, they might always go to the same place. You have a lot of data from one place and none from just down the road. So dealing with these sorts of things. And phone ID apps, great. Anyone use Merlin? So this helps you identify birds. It can listen to bird sound and tell you what birds you're listening to. But there is an algorithm underneath that, and it might not necessarily get it right. So taking account of all of these sorts of things. Machine learning, so also now known as AI, is sort of fundamentals in statistics, really. Most of these models sit under some kind of regression-based model right at the center of them. But they can also be really useful in terms of classification and prediction. So we get a lot of data now which is counting animals in aerial images or matching photographs of the same individuals, extracting acoustic calls from massive acoustic data sets. And we had a survey that was done in southern Namibia, aerial survey, lots of digital images. Took a human 9 months to go through and classify all of the images. So we had a PhD student work at looking at machine learning models to actually capture out, even if it doesn't get it perfectly right, it captures out the animals, and then you can ground truth just the images where you think there are animals in them. Speeds up the process immensely. And those outputs tend to get used as inputs to a variety of statistical models. For example, density estimation. And then new data types often require new analytical methods. So we had the image of the boat going around the ocean earlier. We have people working on ocean gliders. So these are little autonomous underwater vehicles that go around and listen for whales and dolphins and look at temperature, depth, salinity, all of that kind of stuff as well. eDNA, again, understanding its persistence and distribution in the environment to use it for biodiversity and impact assessments. There's talk of using eDNA, or not talk, is actually being used in offshore consenting as well, to understand a bit more about the types of animals that live in the areas where we might construct offshore renewables, that sort of thing. And then non-invasive sampling methods for difficult to study wildlife populations. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can monitor and assess and study things now, and we need to keep up with those in terms of the statistics that we might employ on them. So that's the sort of things we do at CREAM. So who am I? Well, I'm head of CREAM Crew, which is our contract research unit. I should say we have 2 directors, co-directors of CREAM. And the contract research unit is made up of all of the research staff that we have. So those are both short and long term. Some of us have been working as research staff for 15 plus 20 years. So that's my role. But I'm also a senior research fellow and work on a number of projects across the department as well. My background is not in mathematics. Shock. So I was a zoologist. I moved up to St Andrews to do a master's in environmental statistics and then a PhD in statistics and biology. So according to my friends who I went to university with, I crossed the dark side. I think it's the light side. It's the only way you can explain and describe lots of things. So I've done teaching and research, so I've kind of done a broad spectrum of things within the university. So I have an idea as to what the research pathways that we want to go down, but also how we bring along the next generation of statistical ecologists to kind of help with that. My research is spatially adaptive smoothing using regression splines in a kind of nutshell. So my main research area is in that current part of that kind of impact framework that I showed you. Describing where things are and why they're there. And then also spatially adaptive power analyses. So these are the types of things where you say, okay, well, if I have these animals in a particular area, I put a wind farm in, there's been a change, can I even detect that change under the same current surveying regime that I have, or what kind of surveying regime do I need? But in a spatial sense, so not just being able to detect a change in animal numbers, but actually can I detect the change in distribution of those animals as well? So there's 2 R packages that I've created that do these things. One is this package MRC, and that fits the spatially adaptive regression splines. And the second is MRC power, and that's basically a bolt-on to MRC, so that you can use that information to look at those spatially explicit changes. So I'm going to look a little bit about some applications of MRC. And these are the 2 little case studies that I have. So I've got one, which is impact assessment for offshore renewables. And the other one is sort of conservation and management decisions. So part of my life is a wind farm person, and the other part is a conservationist in Namibia. So I kind of split my brain.
Quite substantially, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, as well as running the contract research unit. So yeah. I need to change hats regularly on a daily basis. Also, it was World Rhino Day yesterday.
Oh, very nice.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start a little bit with some impact assessment for offshore renewables. So it's kind of a messy slide, but that's kind of intentional. So what we tend to have is transect survey data and GPS tracking data that we get that are for looking at marine mammals and seabirds is kind of my main gig, but other people tend to look at the benthos and the atmospheric and climate and all of that kind of thing as well. As I said, we've got prospective and retrospective analyses that we can look at, and frameworks for mapping relative risk from future offshore wind. So the top messy picture is showing a way that we, it's an ongoing project that we have, which is looking at developing a sensitivity map for seabirds for the entirety of Danish waters. And that will get layered in with a sensitivity map for marine mammals, one for the benthos, one for the atmospheric, and so you end up trying to find the best places, because we all know that wind farms are going to be built. We may as well try and find the best or least bad places to put them in terms of the environment that we're disturbing when we do it. And then we've got a comparison of risk assessment methods as well. So I have a PhD student working on a project called Project WOW, which is a big consortium project in the eastern seaboard of the US. We think it's still going. It's unclear at this point whether we will, but our PhD student is looking at comparisons of methods. So you can either go very complex or quite simple. And quite simple clearly is going to have some biases, and very complex means you need a lot more data and you might not have the information. So it's trying to find out if there's a point where actually you don't need to be as complex. And if you can get the less complex a little bit more robust, then maybe that's a way to look at things. And I think that's actually quite important when it comes to things like computing, in terms of maybe we don't need to keep getting more and more and more and more and more complicated. We can just pull ourselves out a little bit and go, actually, maybe for the questions that we're answering, the simpler, more structured scoring approaches, which is what we have here in the top picture versus the much more complicated one in the bottom one, maybe the simpler approaches are sufficient to answer some things. So it's finding that balance. Okay, why offshore renewables? Well, the UK has a globally important seabird and marine mammal populations, and the rapid expansion of offshore renewables may adversely affect these. They are also protected under various European regulations. And the UK has a multi-step procedure for developers to lease certain areas of the sea, secure consents, and begin construction. And they have these two main aspects. One is an environmental impact assessment, and then one is a habitat regulation assessment. And how do they do this? Well, for seabirds particularly, they have baseline survey data. So before any construction is allowed, they must do some baseline survey data for 24 months. So that's one survey a month for 24 months. And they use this information to assess things like spatial persistence, temporal variation, potential impact. So we can start to look at some scenario planning, what might happen. And then if under the current surveying regime, changes in abundance and distribution might be detected post-construction. So can we even detect any changes on the basis of the data that we have? So if it's highly variable data, we're less likely to be able to detect changes even if they occur. Okay, so a little case study. So this is not the UK, this is in Denmark, but it's a very nice data set that we have from Denmark, which has 25 years of data. In response to the construction of 3 different wind farms. So we have our first wind farm down the bottom here, which is tightly spaced. These dots are all the turbines. Then we have the second wind farm constructed up there, and the third one to the north. And these were constructed in 2002, 2009, and 2018. And the lines that you see here, these are our transect lines. So we're doing that distance sampling that I talked about, but from an aeroplane. And it's not exactly perfect like this. This is just the design. And there was a slight change in design over the years, but generally speaking, we have information for 62 of these surveys from 2000 to 2005. So our distance sampling methods, we pull that across all the surveys because we don't believe that the detectability changes year to year, because we have other factors in there that mop up that variability, like sea state or behavior of the changed without me asking. Observer, sea state groups, and that sort of thing. And we also have uncertainty estimation. So we're estimating this detection function, which means there is some uncertainty associated with it. And we must propagate that through into the next step, which is going to be the spatial models. And at the bottom there are just some examples of what the detection function might look like. So distance on the x-axis, so you see everything, and then you see less as you move away. And spatial modelling methods. So we take these transects that we have and we split them into little pieces for those segments. And then within each of those, we have the number of animals that were not observed, but observed with the correction for the distance sampling. We can use something called the treaty family as a response distribution or error distribution. Various covariates, so we've got bathymetry, distance to coast. We use our spatial coordinates to mop up that kind of unmodelled variability. And we use robust standard errors to accommodate for potential residual correlation. I'm not sure why it keeps moving. So the residual correlation aspect of it is because we're gathering data sequentially in time along those transects. And again, we can do a parametric bootstrap of our model with the detection function uncertainty coming into that. Sorts of things we can get out. We can get abundance estimates. That's a requirement for these habitat assessments. We can get lots of different maps, changes, look at changes in density with distance to wind farm, and we can get uncertainty available for all of our outputs. Okay, so do you think there's been effect of the wind farm installations on the abundance and distributions of birds? This happens to be the common scoter, which is a small diving duck. What do we think? So top left, no wind farms were built. Then we have 1 wind farm, 2 wind farms, 3 wind farms.
They like.
Well, in this top one, they like the wind farm because it wasn't there yet. Right, so the first one to be built was this bottom one, so that's that one up there. Then in that one, the bottom one and the middle one were built, and then this one, all 3 were built.
They don't like freedom.
Does it give them some reference?
Right.
Yeah,
So
it's a feature somehow.
this is what happened post-construction of the middle wind farm. Blue means less animals.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to see just looking at a single instance, right? But if those single instances are actually multiple surveys, so there's a lot more information in there than you can just see on that one plot. And here the blue, and you can't really see it, there are little circles on it. That's a significant difference. So we've used all of the bootstrap information from all of the surveys, all of that uncertainty to decide if there is a significant difference, where significance basically says the confidence interval for that grid cell doesn't contain 0, right? So there is a significant decline in density of common scoters in and around that footprint post-construction of that wind farm. Highlighted by the other circle. The interesting thing is that normally might be where people leave it, and they look at it in that way. They've found that there is a what we call a displacement effect, and they will look at it in a univariate sense. So what we've done is we've taken 1 kilometre bands out from that wind farm, and first of all, I'll show you what it looks like when we just look in all directions at once, and then when we split it into the 3 sectors. So on the left here, it shows that we have a 4 to 5 kilometre displacement kind of in all directions from the footprint of that wind farm. But if we actually change that and look at the different sectors, so we had 1 to the east, which is kind of coastal, 1 to the north, which is where the Hornsby 3 wind farm will be built, and then a kind of more offshore one, we get quite a difference. So the northeast and southeast, they're actually really down to the 1 to 2.5 kilometre mark, much smaller than we said on average. And in the west, it's much higher, it's up to 5 to 6 kilometres. So it's important how you look. Okay, so you've got all this information and we can come up with all of these numbers, but it's important how you look. And one of the biggest problems is the displacement distances is something that goes into a bigger framework as part of the assessment process. And at the moment, that assessment framework only takes 1 number. So it doesn't allow for any uncertainty on that number, and you have to come up with a number. And that number is used for that species across all wind farms, even though even within a wind farm it can be different.
Yeah, it's a spherical cap, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, change hat. Let's travel to Namibia and see what we can do there. So we have a number of projects going on in Namibia. One is real-time analysis of GPS tracking data. So we have vultures that are tagged, and we look at anti-poisoning efforts and protection of this the red-listed species. So we have a real-time system that displays to the national parks and the ministry in Namibia. They can look at that and find feeding locations, find clusters of feeding locations, and potentially avert big mass poisoning events that you get at the moment. And I think there was something in the news maybe yesterday, the day before, about Kruger National Park maybe potentially going to lose all of its vultures due to mass poisoning events. When I say mass, I mean we're talking 200 to 500 vultures at a time being taken by these. We also look at home range analysis from GPS tracking. So successful release of traffic pangolin. We don't really know anything about pangolin, or we didn't. We do now, but we didn't know anything about them. So pangolin are traffic live. So what do you do with them? Where do you put them? Where do they like to live? What do they like to eat? Do they all like the same thing? These are all questions that we need to be able to answer to know what to do with those animals. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. We can also use GPS tracking data for management of elephant populations. Yes, surprisingly, Namibia is one of the few countries in the world where elephant populations are increasing to the point where they need to level them off a little bit. And then rhino space needs and wet season movements. So a lot of the surveys that get done are done during the dry season, and it's knowing what to do in the wet season for those. Generally estimating distribution from survey data, so we're looking at distribution changes over time, identification of high-risk areas of poaching, so we do a lot of work with rhino data and assessment areas for patrolling, where to put your efforts for the patrols, that sort of thing. Identifying barriers to movement, so fences, roads, lots of animals like to move, like to migrate, can't do so, particularly when we have years and years of drought following drought following drought. The animals need to be able to move to find water and food, and they can't. So we look at those barriers. And yeah, just drivers of a changing distribution in a world of climate change. So what is it that these animals need to be able to survive? Okay, just lastly, I realise I'm taking a bit of time here, but pangolins. So they're the most trafficked mammal worldwide, scales and meat. They also suffer habitat fragmentation and loss, and unfortunately, their defense mechanism is to roll up into a ball. Means they can be picked up, also means that when they hit an electric fence, they go around it. So simple management measures like not electrifying the bottom rung. It sounds so simple, but it's one that needs to be introduced so that less of that happens. There are 8 species worldwide, and all are IUCN red listed. And this is old, data's a bit old now, but during 2019, they seized 123 pangolins, 49 of them were alive. This is just in Namibia. They're nocturnal, elusive, ground-dwelling, use old burrows, and roll into a ball when threatened. So, you know, they really don't have the best life history for, and ecology for being able to study or help in some of these things. So we used a private nature reserve in sort of central area of Namibia. We had 46 residents tagged. We had VHF tags and also GPS locations when located on foot by the researcher. And GPS tracking of 16 of them, which gave us hourly measurements during active hours. So we combined these 2 data types, used that MRC package I talked about to estimate home ranging core areas for each individual. So we can look at the size and overlap in relation to the environment. How much space do they need? Will they play with other pangolins or not? These sorts of questions. So we looked at the home range overlap in the growing season on the left and the non-growing season in the middle. And the darker the colour, the more kind of overlapping of those home ranges. And the males in the growing season on this side. And by growing, we mean plant life is growing in that sense. I mean, the animals will as well, but food availability, really. So you can see that there is some overlap with some of the males, but actually they do tend to keep quite separate. But there's something interesting about this area here, water. So even if you'd have territoriality, you still get some comings together, and it may not be temporal overlap either.
How big is the domain?
Good question. I'm not sure I can remember. This area here is about 2 kilometers wide.
Okay.
So there's a kind of inner fenced area, which is where the lodges are and various things like that.
Yes.
And a slightly leaky fence, as you can see. Some animals crossing into it. So pangolin territorial and the impact of releases on residents needs to be assessed. Males tend to have larger home ranges. There's more male-to-male overlap than previously thought. So actually males will overlap a little bit. But animals are really highly stressed when they are released. And this was a closed system. So actually animals couldn't have bigger home ranges even if they wanted to. So we have studies done in other areas where in a much larger roaming environment, they will actually take on larger home ranges. But yeah, the key is also being able to release those pangolins when they have good body weight. So actually, rehabilitation is kind of the first step. Okay, and just to finish, I just wanted to bring us back to sort of why we're here in a little sense, and that is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So all of the work that we do at CREAM falls into, I picked these 5. I'm sure there's bits and pieces that fall into some of the other, I think there's 17 or plus in total. But clean energy, so renewables, wind farms, that sort of thing. Climate action, so this is looking at the how climate affects those distribution of those animals. Life below water, we have a huge marine section, people working in various different parts of that. Life on land, just looked at some of the land-based stuff. And this partnership for the goals. So we work across industry, government, NGOs, all sorts, in order to be able to ensure that we, I'm not a subject matter expert in any of the animals that I've spoken about, but I can do the statistics of those, but I can't do the statistics if I don't have information from the subject matter experts on the sorts of things that these animals like and how they kind of live life. Okay, that's the end of my talk. I just thought for those that haven't seen a pangolin with GPS tag sitting on its back, and play a little video. And they walk on 2 feet. They're like little T-Rexes, but much cuter. So anyway, thank you very much.